Well, hello, everybody. My name is Joe Rushak. I'm a writer and a storyteller. And with me on my right is my son, Jim, and left is my son, Jesse. We're here to talk a little bit about our family and our history. And I thought probably the best place to begin would be where we are right now. We're located in a building which was part of my dad's taxidermy studio. In fact, there are heads hanging on the walls, but there's also a lot of things in here that have to do with material culture of the indigenous people of this region, which has been a lifelong interest of mine and probably where my story should begin. My grandfather himself, although he was very brown-skinned and visibly looked native, would simply say, "Well, I'm French." And I'd say, "Well, how come you're so dark-skinned, Grandpa?" He'd say, "Us French is always dark." In fact, when I asked him what happened, why he left school in fourth grade, he said, "Because they called me an Indian." He jumped out the window and went to work for Seneca Smith in the woods and never came back to school again. Because there were things about him that were so visibly native, not just his appearance, but the way he carried himself in the world. In fact, that tradition of trusting people is so characteristic of indigenous cultures throughout North America. So by the time I went to college, I was trying to find out everything I could about an ancestry that had been hidden, that hadn't been talked about, even though it was there generation after generation. My great-great-grandparents were basket makers, making Native American baskets on Mill Road, right behind the gas station where my grandparents raised me. I raised my sons with a deep awareness of our indigenous history. They knew Native people from their very first years. It's hard to do a second language when you're older and you haven't heard it from childhood. So I made sure these guys heard the language, had a sense of the language and the Native connection, especially the kinds of things that are part of indigenous culture. Respect for the earth, understanding how to live in balance, and also knowing how there are so many gifts the earth gives us.
I'm Dwayne Cornell, the town historian for the town of Greenfield. Located just north of the geographical center of Saratoga County, the town of Greenfield was formed in 1793 from part of the town of Milton and the town of Saratoga. In 1801, nearly 60% of the northern portion was removed and became the towns of Corinth, Hadley, and part of the town of Day. Greenfield is currently the largest town in Saratoga County. The town of Greenfield lies within the Katerosseras Patent, which we today call the Kateros Patent. The Kateros Patent was a land grant that was given to 13 influential New York colonists by the governor of the New York colony, Lord Cornbury, in 1708. There was a land dispute with the Mohawks for 60 years. The area wasn't settled until the late 1700s. A very few early settlers were reputed to have come to the area that would someday become Greenfield. One such person was Preston Denton, who is said to be the first white man to settle in the area. He came from Connecticut in 1775 and built a cabin in the southeast area of the town near Denton Road, which is named for him. He then left and joined a Stillwater militia and fought in the Revolutionary War. He was captured, but escaped while aboard a British prison ship at New York and returned to Greenfield. One of the early arrivals to the town of Greenfield was a man by the name of Gershom Morehouse. He came to this area 1786. Gershom came to the area that we now know as Middle Grove, and he established a grist mill, the first grist mill in the town of Greenfield.
My name is Mark Young. I'm a descendant of early settlers in the Greenfield area. Ambrose Cole and my seventh generation back grandfather, Isaac Ormsby. Ambrose Cole and Isaac were friends. They all, like I said, originated in Rhode Island. They walked to this area after the Revolutionary War was done. They liked this area so much that they came back. They walked back from Rhode Island together and came up here to settle, and just started with a small farm across the road from where we are, where the cemetery is here. So my grandfather, as he got elderly and knew his time was getting close, he said, I want you to bury me in the cemetery, the family cemetery that you've now cleaned up. My grandfather was first, and then my grandmother, and then her sister, who I got quite a bit of the history of the farm from. Mildred never told me how they considered the view. The view now is the thing that grabs you when you come up here. A very unique place. It's a unique place that the view is this wide, that you can see so much from one spot. Pico Peak and Vermont Equinox is right there. And then, yeah, there's probably not a lot of cemeteries that have a view as good as this one does.
I'm with the Town of Greenfield Historical Society, and I'm their president. I'm here today with my cousin, Clifford Young.
Isaac Ormsby settled here, and then he had a son, Russell Mason, who was really the man that made all the money for the Ormsby family. Because he went all over. He was the lead surveyor for the Delaware and Hudson. He traveled. Well, in fact, he met President Grant at one time over at Grant's cottage. He'd go to Chicago. He went to the World's Fair down in Philadelphia. And in the diaries, he stopped and watched them build the Brooklyn Bridge. He traveled all over with his wife. You read her diaries. They never left the house.
So tell us about the house.
The house was built in 1872.
So where was the original house before this one was built?
Right here.
It was right
on
in this
spot,
location,
yeah.
Also.
But this house is just like it was then, except for that room when you come in. Yeah. That was built on later. That was my grandmother and grandfather's bedroom.
The original Cateros patent that was here, and our fifth great-grandfather, Holtham Dunham, pretty much built not this part, this was an addition, but right behind you, the very first structures here were built between 1790 and 1800, right after the Revolutionary War. All of those generations kept us really firmly rooted in what was Mohican and Mohawk land. We've always been here. The stone walls, most of the stone walls around here were built by Dunham hands. There's Dunham Pond Road. There was Dunham Mill.
Dunham Brook.
many of the family has left marks here that will last.
Hello, I'm Bill Dake, Chairman of the Board of Stewards, and I'm trying to give you a little background on how the Dake family arrived in Greenfield and developed the Stewart's Ice Cream Company over a period of almost a century. You know, they got a grant of several hundred acres on Dake Town Road north of Middle Grove. They farmed that land for several years, and in the early 1900s, Stark Dake and his wife Melvina had 11 children, 2 of whom were Charles V. Dake, my father, and Percy W. Dake, my uncle, and they proceeded to raise dairy cattle. After a few years, they wanted to get a bigger return for their dairy cattle and their milk, so they started Dake's Delicious Ice Cream.
Up until the Civil War and then the early 1900s through World War II, it was all of this area was just all the families maintaining all their own independent farms. This land wasn't good enough to sustain that size of farms. It was just too hard to farm up here. The seasons were too short, winters were too harsh, and everybody kind of, after World War II and even before, had to start working outside of the farm. And then it was more guys worked at either International Paper or GE or in Saratoga. and they still farm, but it became much more of a part-time venture. And then the farm started to shrink, and from where they were doing 100 acres or 70 or 80 acres, everything kind of dropped down to where everybody was doing 20 or 30 acres, much smaller amount, and then it just kind of slipped away. And what Greenfield, now we're left with the few farms that still kind of date back, but farming is still the romantic term everybody wants to use, but it's really just maintaining. Who's maintaining an open area or a field?
We're talking about the Brookside Dairy. That originally was Clarence Hall, who began Brookside Dairy, and Clarence, I believe, was killed in a train incident up here at the corner of Porter's Road at the train station up there. And then his son Harold took over the farm, and his son Harold, who was always called Sonny, and they ran the farm. Harold L. and Harold C. Hall ran the farm until the 70s, I believe. I spent my whole life in the milk industry after playing on the farm, riding, baling hay, having lunch with the farm hands. They bottled their own milk, and they were one of the only farms I'm aware of, other than in Saratoga, that bottled their own milk there. And they were one of the original, had what they call electro-pure pasteurization of the milk, which didn't require a tank. The milk was pasteurized as it was going into the containers.
This is our pasteurizer, electric pasteurizer.
Now, when did you put this in?
In 32.
Oh, okay, right. So you made the transition. I know in the research we've done, a lot of farms just went to milking and selling the milk to, say, Stewart's or...
Yeah.
But you put in the equipment.
We put in the equipment.
They also had a pretty good milk route in Saratoga. I remember Mr. Davis would take Randy and Greg and I in the truck, and we would go on a Saturday morning. He'd let us go with him in the milk truck, and he'd go to places like the country store and Pepper's Market and make few deliveries, maybe some home deliveries as well. And their last stop was always Ellsworth Ice Cream, and Paul would treat us to milkshakes at Ellsworth, which was a great treat.
You know where Tunison's funeral home is there on Lake Avenue?
Mm-hmm.
I was up about 3 houses this side of it, up on as you're going up, right in back of it. And Mrs. Wright says, I gotta pay it today. I said, please wait till tomorrow morning, will you? I said, my horse won't be out there when I get out there. She says, oh no, Harold. She said, Ben will divorce me. I said, well, if he's going to be divorced, get the money then. So she went up and got the money. Just I got out on the sidewalk. She was just making the turn onto Lake Avenue.
Okay.
I hollered, Molly, stop. She wouldn't. I swore at her and I said, you so-and-so, stop. And Molly and her ear went up like that. Feet stopped, dead still. I
eventually ended up at Saratoga Dairy, and then ended my career up at the ice cream plant in Greenfield.
My name is Cody Sargent. I live at 450 North Creek Road here in Greenfield Center.
And I'm Kateri Sargent.
My wife and I have been farming now since 2019. When I was a kid, I was dead set I was going to be a farmer. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a full-time farmer. I loved it. I loved the idea of doing it. I loved the idea of having the ability to provide for ourselves. The first big thing was learning from great-grandma and great-grandpa. When the farm is your only source of income, it's a challenge, and it's very hard, and it's very stressful. And I wanted to be able to enjoy and love farming.
When I was a child, I loved animals. I think that runs through my family's blood is love of animals. And I wanted a farm, but I had to find somebody who had knowledge of farming, so I wasn't going in completely blind. And I think that's just really what started our relationship. We started talking about farming and hunting and fishing and preserving heritage. Well, we never knew that goats produced fiber, but we found by buying one of our goats a friend that there is this wonderful fiber called cashmere that is produced by goats.
So we have the goats, but recently we've also added yaks to the farm. Now, people hear the yaks and they, kind of think we're nuts. However, some things to keep in mind with yaks is they are a fiber animal. You brush them out just like the goats, and you end up with 3 levels of yak fiber. Actually are working very well for our fiber farm, because that's really what we focus on here is fiber.
And my vision, and this is going to take some time, is that being that we focus so much on education, that's really what our main focus is here on the farm, is educating, is to have it set up so people can come see the process from start to finish. And so that's what I would love to offer. We're in the works of trying to get that program started.
So we actually are able to process all of our fiber by hand. So when you go to de-hair cashmere, you can sit there with the cashmere on your lap and either a pair of tweezers or really small fingers and be able to pick out all the guard hairs. And so that you end up with that pure, luxurious cashmere. And then we have hand carders. So you load up the carder and then you brush it out. Or we have a drum carder, which is, the hand carders but are on a wheel so that you can card the fiber. We have the ability to teach somebody how to spin with either drop spindles or spinning wheels. And then upstairs is where we have our floor loom. We have our Ashford rigid heddle loom. We have the collapsible loom. We have a series of looms essentially for different stages of comfort level with what people want to learn.
What we are going to see in the future, because there are such smaller lots of land in comparison to what it was, say, 100 years ago, is we're going to see a lot more personal farms or micro farms. They're not going to be the commercial industrial farms, but I think that's okay. I think it's going to be more of like it was 100 or 200 years ago here, where there really wasn't that industrial commercial farming, but people were still able to support themselves and their neighbors.
They're like, we've already gotten our feed, we've already gotten our grain, what do you want? Hi, Emmy. Hi, sweet love. Hi, Link. Hi, Link. Annis. Hi, sweetie. Hello, Annis. Hi, baby.
Hi, baby.
I know. Hi, Peachy. What you doing, Peaches? What you doing, Peaches?
We are here today at the IOF Hall in Middle Grove with Robert Rokel, who is going to tell us about his family and growing up in Middle Grove.
Right after the stock market crash, my grandfather came to this country from Germany, originally emigrated to Brooklyn. During the Second World War, they moved up to Greenfield from Brooklyn, bought a farm on King Road. They became friends with the Kaleniuses, which owned the store here in Middle Grove, which was at the corner of Murray Road and Middle Grove Road. And they subsequently purchased that store and ran that, pretty much until it burned in 1994. I have good memories and bad of the store. The good memories were you got to see everybody, you got to know everybody, everybody knew who you were. Well, that could be bad. But you got to know people. You also heard a lot of adult conversations when you were there. I became very close with my grandparents, especially my grandmother. People would come into the store or sit on the porch and they would just talk and you'd learn all kinds of things. The difficult things were growing up. My parents and grandparents worked in the store all the time, and it's Hard to imagine now, but the store was open every day except for Christmas. Because the store we owned was where the Kaleniuses owned, but then there was a store next to that, which was called the Rowell store, and then there was the store building next to that, which was the hotel. My grandfather had torn that down to build his house. The town hired me as their building inspector, code enforcement officer. The store burned in '94. So everything was kind of crazy because I couldn't do the inspections on my own property. I couldn't do any of that stuff. So, and '94 was not a good year for me. I had worked for the Stewarts for many years. When I was in college, I reached out and I negotiated directly with Bill Dake at the time, and we decided it was going to be best and more cost effective for me to sell the property. So I've been here 64 years, and I've really enjoyed living in Greenfield.
The fire in 1907, it actually started on a very windy day, April 22nd. By noon, it had started in a rental home, but then the fire, because of the wind, it took off. Took the hotel, and then a couple other houses in that strip. But then ambers would fly to the other side of the road and take that house. When it got done, this building, the IOF Hall, the Baptist church next door was still here. The Methodist church was there, but the house next door to it was not. And it went all the way down to Wilsey Road. But in the main town here, I believe the count was like 14 houses, a chicken coop, a bunch of barns, and the hotel. In Middle Grove was a trolley system that came up from Ballston Spa. Do we know anything about that?
There are photos of the trolley stopping in front of the general store that my parents and grandparents owned. There's a big platform there, and the trolley also would bring up supplies. It went beyond where the store was, and then it turned off and headed towards the Cateros Creek.
After you do the small schools here, you had to go somewhere else. And so they were going to Ballston Spa for high school at the time because the trolley would take them there. A lot of the farmers were moving their milk to Ballston Spa also by the trolley.
The trolley at that time, it was also, that helped develop Middle Grove, which at the time was Janesville.
Right.
So, it helped develop it because there was a hotel. There were 3 or 4 stores here. There was a post office. It's hard to imagine, because the commerce that was in Middle Grove or Janesville was gone literally around the time of the Depression, because that's pretty much when everything disappeared.
I'm Patty Schwartzbeck from Porter Corners, New York. I've lived here all my life, and we had the store for 30 years, 26 years. And this is our daughter, Kathleen, who owns the house behind the store.
And my grandmother lived in this house for a lot of that time, so now I am back in her house and making it my own. And now I currently own the store, but I do not run it. I rent it out.
My grandparents came from Poland in the early 1900s and settled up on the mountain. My grandfather worked at the graphite mine.
There's a lot of history right here.
Yes, right here. Was settled by a Revolutionary War veteran. He built the house across the way, and he started the store, and there was a bank. His name was Ashel Porter, and the store has been operating ever since then at different times as different things. It's been a general store. It's been a butcher shop. It's been a mortuary. It's been the post office. It's been a lot of things. It was a community. Everybody came to the store. When I was a child, we would come to the store, and Joe had the bottled milk, and we would bring back the bottles. We'd get the quart bottles of milk, which with the cream on the top. My husband and I bought it in 1976, and it had just about everything you could use. My mother-in-law moved up here in 1978, I think, 77 or 78, and she needed a job, so she went to work, I went back to school, and she gets most of the credit. People thought she owned the store, which was fine with us.
As kids, we spent a lot of time here. I have a sister and a brother as well with Graham, or on weekends. This is our first job was at the store. I won't tell you how old we were, but
we had a big candy case which had
penny
candy.
Yeah,
a lot of penny candy at the top, and it had penny candy on one side and the 5-cent candy bars, expensive ones, on the other side, and underneath the bottom shelf was all school supplies.
When Mom and I walk, even just up around their house, all the things that are still there, and the Sky Ranch where the Campfire Girls used to be, and we haven't made it to the graphite mine in a lot of years, but the old graphite mine's up there, and there's all these bits of history and things like that, and you think about a little town like Porter Corners and what it has. It's pretty amazing. How much is here? How much history is here?
My name's John Greenwood. I grew up in Greenfield I was born in 1955, and lived in Greenfield until I was married in the early 70s. We actually lived in 3 different homes in Greenfield, one right here where the community center is, and then my parents bought a house 2 buildings up from the general store right here at the intersection. One of the main memories of living in Greenfield was the dirt path. We always called it the path. There was no sidewalks in Greenfield, so everybody would walk down to the store. My mother would send me down for bread or milk or, whatever we needed. The Atwells at the time owned the store, Harry and Edna, and John and Dot Atwell. The creaky old floors and the screen door slamming, and everybody would kind of meet there. And there was always a bench. There was a bench on the front of the store. It was full of carved initials of all the kids that lived in town. Every cabbage night, the night before Halloween, that bench would end up either up here on the town hall, on the stoop, or on the roof of the porch of the store. Harry Atwell had this beautiful white gray hair, and he always used to call me Johnny Jump Up, and tell me he was going to pin my ears back. But he didn't scare you. That was Harry. I remember right across where the new post office is now, apparently there had been an old hotel. When I grew up in the 60s, it was just an empty lot where the post office and the airport building are, and it was a big pit. One other building in town was the Greenfield Grange. And in the woods there, Vin Smerrow, who owned Smerrow's Garage down here where the gas station is now, Vin's woods were just littered with old cars. And as kids, we used to play around in the cars and things like that. And Vin would allow us to ride our mini bikes and stuff on a trail that circled the back behind the hill and ended up over on the Cornell's property where we had a cabin. And we used to play tag in the Christmas tree field behind the cabin. Mr. Cornell had Christmas trees back there, and we used to play tag in the middle of the night. I went to school with Perrin Dake. He was in my class. But the Dake family, Philly and Charlie Dake, were wonderfully supportive of the youth in Greenfield. But Perrin and I were good friends, and I would stay overnight at the mansion up on top of, it's always been Dake's Hill to me. It was originally Haggerty Hill. And from the top of that building, you can see over to Vermont and all through Saratoga, out to Saratoga Lake.
Greenfield is a rural town removed from the major population centers of Saratoga County. Its hills, streams, woodlands, and open fields speak of pastoral country. However, there is another side to the story. Early settlers, attracted by the flowing waters of the Cateros, built sawmills, grist mills, and woolen mills, mostly for local market. Over the years, others took this entrepreneurial spirit to another level. In the 1830s, John W. James, a Greenfield native, developed a manufacturing town in a rural setting, building the area's first paper mills, a Baptist church, several houses, and established the Jamesville Bank, named after him and his town, today known as Middle Grove. A decade later, another ambitious businessman arrived with an unusual business in an even more unusual location. In 1844, Oscar Granger relocated his glass factory from Mount Vernon, New York, to the wilderness location near Lake Desolation, north of Jamesville, where he built the factory and a small company town that he named Mount Pleasant. Initially, no roads led to this remote spot at the crest of the mountain. However, the ingredients necessary to produce glass bottles, limestone, sand, and ash, were available in abundance, as was limitless acres of hemlock forest to fuel the ovens. Two other critical components made the glass factory a thriving business for over 20 years. John W. James's bank provided the investment funds, and Dr. John Clark, owner of the Congress Springs and Saratoga Springs, was the primary customer for Granger's bottles. In 1867, the Mount Pleasant Glass Factory Works closed and moved to Saratoga Springs as the Congressville Glass Works.
So they started Saratoga Dairy on the west side of Saratoga, had a bottling operation, a bottle washer, and a pasteurizer. The farmers would bring their milk in, they would bottle it, give it to them, and the farmers would then go out and deliver it. After the war in 45, they wanted to expand Saratoga Dairy, and the state had licensing regulations for selling milk by township. So you literally had to buy somebody else to expand, and they bought Stewart's Dairy in Ballston Spa from Don Stewart. Also, at the end of World War II, CV bought the former house of McMullen on the Haggerty Hill overlooking Greenfield. They also started raising Southtown sheep, where the whole Perky and Patches story came from, where we had a naming contest in Stewart's and named them and used to take them around to the stores in a playpen for a petting zoo with two little sheep. One of the unique things about our area was that we had one of the two television stations in the country. WRGB in Schenectady was run by the General Electric Company, and we started buying commercial time every Sunday afternoon from 5 to 6 for the Stewart's Western Sunday with Hopalong Cassidy. The commercials consist of showing a bunch of kids make your own sundaes, and literally at 6 o'clock there'd be a line outside of every store because we were literally the only show in town. My father retired to Florida and flipped houses in Sarasota. Charlie and I had to guarantee the loan, and we ended up with being the two co-owners of Stewart's Ice Cream. Stewart's grew rapidly, and in the middle 70s, he walked into my office one day and announced that he'd had a physical and had colon cancer and died a few years later. This was traumatic if it's your brother, your best friend, and your business partner. We were going to purchase a store in Hudson from the Mobil Oil Company, and they would only sell it to us if we sold gas. And this was in '71. And then over the next 3 decades, we probably opened a store a month during all the season except the winter, which was a conversion of a gas station to a Stewart shop selling gasoline. And that's when the primary growth period took place.
I am Walter E. Chandler. I grew up here in Greenfield. We had a very large family here. My dad's the last of 17 brothers and sisters. So growing up, I was with my uncles in the logging business, and I really enjoyed it, really took to it, really loved it, and wanted to start my own business, and that's what I did. I actually remember telling one of the wood procurement foresters for Finch Pine that I was going to be one of his bigger producers someday, and I don't think he believed me. But then I came out and I'm one of their bigger producers, which is nice. 100 years ago, the loggers were rugged. I mean, they were tough. A lot of stuff they hand felled, and they did the river drives, and very, very dangerous. So when you see their boots nailed to the tree, you know the logger lost his life. It's a very tight-knit community. We are good friends, and we share a lot of marketing techniques and equipment. We check on each other. I actually wanted to work directly with landowners and find the markets for them and harvest the timber. And in my mind, I mean, providing a service. If you can't provide a service, then I didn't feel like that's reputable. And my family, growing up as children, my children, of course they're going to love the big equipment, and I got them out there early and got them started, but I had my 2 boys driving log skidders and very young age, and they were incredible at it. My wife runs the office, Michelle, and Michelle takes care of all the stuff at home, and she runs for all the parts and takes care of all the things we need out in the field. She does take care of landowners and their paperwork and stuff like that, and she keeps us on schedule. And we have grandchildren coming. We have number 6 on the way, and we have 1 girl, 4 boys that are all interested in the logging. I plan on working forward with keep the business going, and my 2 boys, Nick and Walker, would keep the business going. And I have a sawmill here. I'm hoping to get that started more than what I have now and start selling lumber locally here to our neighbors. We would like Greenfield to stay special. It's just a nice little kind of a farm community, and right out just outside of Saratoga and north of Albany. It's a pretty special place.
Hi, I'm here with Mary Rhodes Carlson at the Daketown School. Mary went to school here as a child. It's a 1-room schoolhouse. Hi, Mary. How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you.
So you grew up just down the road a little piece?
A little over a mile over on North Creek Road.
And you would walk to school every day?
I walked to school every day.
And you went to school here at this school?
I did. I spent all 8 years. I started out first seat, first grade side by the blackboard, and I ended up in the last seat on the 8th grade side by the windows.
What years would that have been?
1942 to 50? 1950. The teacher when I started was Miss Mary Chatfield. Then she married Herb Coons from Middle Grove.
Alrighty. So what time did school start?
We started at 9 to 4.
Alrighty.
That was our hours. Recess was 10 and 2. Lunch was 12 to 1. And we had to go out unless it was pouring rain, because that was the teacher's only time to herself. So she wanted us out. This is the bell that I actually sometimes really wanted to see go away. It was always rang at the end of recess and at the end of lunch. And it really, the sound carried a long ways. But when we were over playing by the little creek between the two Dake foundations, it's just a little dip down. It was just enough we didn't hear the bell. And we would get in trouble. When you sat over there where the little kids were, and everybody had a 15-minute class, and you were supposed to be doing your assigned homework, practicing your letters and stuff, but you couldn't help but listen to what was going on in every other class. So by the time you got to that class, you already knew the basics. You just need the textbook to fill it out and the personal attention for the teacher to explain it. So it was, you almost learned by osmosis.
What was winter like during the school day?
Lots of fun, lots of snow. We would, once we went out for lunch, if we walked to meet the Palm kids, we would sleigh ride down Fred Karp's Hill. The teacher always helped us pick out a play, and every single student had to have a poem that they memorized and recited, and we every year had a Christmas program for the parents.
So after your day at school, you walked home?
We walked home. The walk home was, of course, down this way, and we went by Mr. Vanna's farm. And quite often I would stop into the Vanna's because Mrs. Vanna made the most delicious pastries. Her kitchen always smelled amazing. Right along here was 3 trees. This is where we played Andy Over. Andy Over is a ball game. It's with a ball, I don't know, maybe 3 inches or something. You had to throw it over the school roof to the other side. And there were teams on each side.
Did you always live here?
Not me.
No.
No, I lived out in Porter's.
By the store?
Yeah, by the store. Your mother lived downstairs. Your mother and my grandfather Young and his wife. Yeah.
And then you lived upstairs?
We lived upstairs, yeah. I always liked it up here, though, because I don't know why. I just liked, when I was a kid, I just liked going out in the fields and looking off and seeing the deer.
So where'd you go to grade school? Was that in Porter's?
Grade school right here in Porter's.
So you went to the school that had 2
rooms. Then they turned it into 3. Let's see, when I was in 6th grade, they split the big room right in half. Mrs. Blue over here was the teacher. Many a time she'd stand me in the corner.
We know you love to talk baseball.
Well, I had the baseball team in Porter Corner. That summer of '58, I had to have the team in Corinth. I got the permission from the superintendent of schools up there to use their field, and I had the team up there that year. But after that, I had it down here. In Porter Corners, you look back, we had the best team of any place around because I had 2 pitchers. Bill Berg come from the Giants, and Gene Fulner, Ron Fulner's brother, went with the Dodgers.
So after the service, is that when you started working at IP?
Oh, I worked at IP before I went in.
Okay.
Yeah, I went there, and well, when I turned 18, I would say I was only 17 when I got out of high school, so I had to wait till I turned 18. I went to work there.
So how long did you work there?
44 years.
44, and you
I
started.
was always proud of that. I missed 7 days in 44 years.
Wow.
4 of them days was go to Red Sox games. So I only missed 3 days because of sickness. I've had a good life. I can't complain. I've had a good life.
I've now published over 180 books, and a lot of them, not all, are about Indigenous people, history, and culture.
The stories, you know, he would come into our rooms in the wintertime and share stories with us. And they were all, you know, many different Native legends, both, you know, Algonquin tales, Iroquois, Mohawk tales, Abenaki tales. And we would hear these stories, and there were good lessons in them. Some of the stories were funny, some of the stories were scary. And with that, too, along with hearing stories, just spending so much time in nature. And my dad doing it in a way that was teaching us sometimes when we didn't know we were being taught. Certainly learning about plants and trees and animals was learning, but also just getting us comfortable in the woods. He would play games where he'd bring us up in the upper field, put us down in the field, and then he would disappear. And we'd have to sit there for a while and kind of get past our fear of the woods. I started out originally just really teaching the skills, but then people knowing my dad, because he became known as a storyteller, they would ask me if I knew any of those stories. And I'd always say, I know the stories, but I don't tell them. Well, eventually I told one around a campfire at a wilderness survival gathering, and I did a pretty good job, I guess. They liked it. They wanted me to tell another one. Well, luckily my dad had some books already published, so I had a few of my dad's books, and I had to refresh some of my memory of a few of the stories. And I told more stories. And within a year, I was telling stories more than I was teaching the wilderness skills. And my grandmother gave us permission to use the property here after my grandfather passed on. So we had a couple small gatherings, bringing schools here, teaching them tracking and survival skills, bringing in storytelling. And that kind of progressed, and we started to utilize this facility and slowly started to renovate, expand, bring in various exhibits until by the mid-90s, it pretty much came close to what it is now, which is our Undocumented Education Center. Everything just kind of grew like a pebble in a pond.
That Middlebury College has asked me if I thought they had invited me, our Chief Stevens of the Nulhegan Band of Abenaki, to which we belong, said, I've set up a meeting with you and the president of Middlebury, Lori Patton. I was really excited because I thought, I'm going to finally publish this, make this dictionary, and maybe get some support from Middlebury. So I came with the manuscript I've been working on for 20 years or so, and I had it in my backpack, and I waited, and I went into this, the president's office with all these people, and I let them speak first. Something I think I learned from my dad. I listened, and she said, I would really love it if you, and I was waiting for her to say, could do this dictionary. She said, would start a language school at Middlebury, be our 12th language school. They're, famous 11 language schools. And I just pushed my backpack back a little bit and didn't pull out the dictionary and said, Pakal Magua, of course. I would love to take this on. It'd be a great challenge, but I think we could do it. And then that was 2019. I have to say, just in acknowledgement, how lucky I've been, a lot like my father's been, to be put in these rooms with these really important elders who have been willing to share with us. And I've recognized and learned from my father that they were not sharing things for us. They were sharing things for us to take on as responsibilities to share with other people. And that's what's led me to Middlebury, and that's what's really informed our work here at the Undocumented Education Center.
Consolidation came up, and everybody was told we had to consolidate. And all the people in this neighborhood really wanted their one-room school. They were very upset, very angry. There was a school meeting, an annual school meeting, which I never went to, but I did for some reason that night. And I ended up being voted in as trustee, knowing nothing about consolidation or what was going on, understanding nothing about it. So I had to do a lot of fast educating myself, and I ended up understanding that the state had passed new laws. The cost for this few dozen families to have to bear that was just too much. And I ended up going to every single house and spending a lot of time with a lot of angry people, explaining it to them. And eventually they understood that there just was no option. We had to consolidate with Saratoga.
Hello, my name is Jay Ellsworth. I am a member of the Greenfield Fire District in Greenfield, New York. I've been a member for roughly 30 years. We are kind of a unique department. We are the largest in Saratoga County. We are 85 square miles roughly, with all kinds of different challenges, obviously, being that big. Greenfield Fire District was formed in 1947. We're coming up on our, I think it's 80th year. We built 4 stations to help protect the community. We have company number 1, which is on South Greenfield Road in Greenfield Center. Company number 2 is in Porter Corners, New York. Also in Porter's Corners is our training center. It's basically a 3-story building with a walkout cellar. We do all our training there for the most part. Company number 3 is in Middle Grove. Company 4 is on Maple Avenue. Today, it's extremely expensive. Everybody gets fitted for gear. Everybody has gear. And, you know, the whole ensemble can cost up in excess of $10,000 per person between buying the gear and the air pack and everything else. Our training program within our district is it's mandated more or less by the state, so it's becoming an issue because people just today in today's world do not have the time to not only volunteer in the fire department, but to do all the training that's required. Well, recruitment and retention has always been a challenge. Obviously, people work for the most part during the day. Daytime is the same with any department right now. To get anybody to turn out for a call during the day is very tough. Looking to the future, usually in the past when our trucks get up around 20 years old, we would buy a new truck. And we bought this truck for $230,000. We just had 3 different manufacturers come in and give us prices on a replacement for this truck. And they all came in between 1.3 and 1.4 million.
We have always had a very unique sharing attitude. A lot of it is the fact that my brother Charlie, my son Gary, myself all worked in the business as young kids, and the people we worked with were really friends. So we had an inclination to want to share with our employees. So in the early 80s, we started an ESOT, an employee stock ownership trust. And we proceeded to bonus the employees. They bought Stewart stock, and they owned about 15% of the business after a few years. Today, that has reached a point where we're up to 40% of employee ownership. The sharing environment makes life a lot more pleasant all the way around. Obviously, at one point, the ice cream plant was in Ballston Spa, and the dairy was in Saratoga. But eventually, everything ends up in Greenfield.
My name is Samantha Hall. I'm here at Lester Park in Greenfield, New York. Lester Park is named for Willard Lester, who donated this land to the New York State Museum in 1914. Stromatolites are the oldest evidence of life, dating to the Cambrian age about 490 million years ago. Where I am standing used to be a shallow seabed, really, used photosynthesis to create oxygen necessary for life. Other fossils came later and are sometimes found between stromatolites. This site of scientific importance is so rare that scientists, teachers, and students come from all over the world to visit and do research. You can make rubbings of the fossils like I did for a science project last spring. I took a regular white paper and placed it over a fossil and did a rubbing with charcoal, which seemed to work better than graphite or chalk. So come to Leicester Park and see something that is completely different from what you've ever seen before. It is free and there are signs for information.
I'm so honored to be part of this story. My name is Jennifer Zeisler, and I am the Recreation Director here of the Town of Greenfield, otherwise known as the TOG. We moved here with our 2 daughters, and from day one, I jumped right in. I met the Recreation Director who worked prior before me, and asked if I could volunteer. I helped her with the tree lighting, which was my first event we attended. I became a Girl Scout leader, which has now been 8 years for the Town of Greenfield. And I started working part-time, I guess that was 3 years ago, April. So I worked with the past recreation director for about 5.5 months, and then she resigned, and I have been the recreation director ever since, and it has been truly the most rewarding 3 years. I love it. I wanted people to have a more sense of belonging. So I started with social hours, TOG social hours, that I want to gather adults. I don't want to just focus my entire department on children's youth. I want to have families and adults and couples, retirees. A lot of seniors have come, widows, people on a fixed income. So I wanted it to be an event where everyone could come and afford to do something. This past year, 2025, right before 2025, I had asked my town board if I could get approval to start social hours for teens. I noticed that a lot of teenagers weren't really giving each other eye contact, didn't have so much confidence, and spent so much time on their phones. So I said, I'm gonna throw a party for just the teenagers and make it a TOG teen social hour. And we had 76 teenagers come out just to socialize, play games, win prizes, bowl, dance. It was truly magical. In the spring, we have a huge soccer program. We have a T-ball program. We're actually looking to add this spring lacrosse to the Town of Greenfield, something we've never done, but we are really excited about. In the summer, we do our summer camp. It is growing. It is fantastic. It's my favorite because I'm a camp kid. And then in fall, our soccer program is huge. Our spring and fall soccer is our biggest sports program we have. We just rolled out all of our winter activities. We have TOG Nordic Ski Club. Our TOG Nordic Ski Club is such a special program. We have about 90 kids that meet at Brookhaven every Thursday night. I am so grateful for the volunteers that we have working together for the recreation department. So many parents step up and are our coaches for soccer. We have the best staff in the summer for summer camp, and so many of our high school and college kids need volunteer hours. And if it wasn't for these families, parents, and students, really the high school and college kids, they have stepped up so much. We couldn't do this program. Everyone says, how do you do it? You're only one person in your department. I'm really not. It's a community effort. People want that small town feel, and I think they crave the sense of belonging. So I feel so grateful that I live here, and I'm so lucky to be raising my 2 daughters in this town. It is a Hallmark movie. I say it all the time.